The night sky above New Mexico sparkled with countless stars as Dr. Alan Morris poured his third cup of coffee. The clock on the wall showed 3:14 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on his mind. For 15 years, he had spent his nights listening to the whispers of the universe, searching for patterns in the cosmic noise. Tonight was different. Tonight, something was talking back. "There it is again," Alan said, his finger tracing the strange spike on his computer screen. The signal appeared, exactly 94 minutes after the previous one, just as it had done for the past 3 nights. It wasn't random noise or a satellite echo. It was precise, deliberate. Alan reached for the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. After several rings, a groggy voice answered. "Lisa? It's Alan. I need you at the observatory. Now." Dr. Lisa. Dawson arrived 40 minutes later, her gray hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. As the observatory's signal processing expert, she had worked with Alan for over a decade. They had chased dozens of potential alien signals together. Each one eventually explained away as natural phenomena or human-made interference. The look on Alan's face told her this time was different. "Show me," she said, dropping her bag on the floor. Alan pointed to his screen. "It's coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri. Same strength, same duration, same 94-minute interval. And Lisa, it contains prime numbers." Lisa's eyes widened as she looked at the data. The signal pulsed in a clear sequence: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19. There was no natural explanation for prime numbers appearing in space. "We need to bring in Jack," Lisa said, referring to their communications specialist. "And that new kid, what's her name?" "Olivia White," Alan replied. "Just finished her PhD in astrophysics. Smart as they come." By sunrise, the small team had gathered in the observatory's main room. Jack Harper, a former military communications expert with a thick beard and kind eyes, studied the signal patterns while Olivia, bright-eyed despite the early hour, worked on mapping the signal's exact origin. "It's definitely artificial," Jack confirmed after several hours of analysis. "And there's more than just prime numbers. There's complex data embedded within the transmission." Olivia looked up from her computer. "Whatever sent this knows mathematics, physics, and how to get our attention." Over the next week, they worked around the clock, analyzing every aspect of the mysterious signal. They kept their discovery secret, following scientific protocol for potential first contact scenarios. But with each passing day, the message became more disturbing. "It's not just saying hello," Jack explained during their morning meeting. "The signal contains what look like star charts, and something that might be a timeline." He pulled up a series of images they had reconstructed from the data. They showed stars throughout their galactic neighborhood with strange markings next to each one. "And these markings," Lisa added, "they appear to be dates. If we're interpreting correctly, something happened to these star systems. Something bad." Alan studied the star chart carefully. The dates show a clear progression, moving from distant stars toward our region of space. He looked up at his colleagues, his face grim. "And Earth is next." By the 3rd week, they couldn't keep their discovery secret any longer. The pattern was too clear, the warning too urgent. Alan drafted a careful message to government officials explaining their findings without causing panic. 3 days later, a convoy of black SUVs arrived at the observatory. Dr. Greg Stewart, the president's chief science advisor, listened carefully as the team presented their findings in the observatory's conference room. Unlike the dismissive government, officials from movies, Dr. Stewart asked thoughtful questions and took detailed notes. "So you believe this is a warning?" he said finally. "From whom?" "We don't know," Alan admitted. "But the mathematics are universal. Whoever sent this wanted to make sure we understood. And the warning? What exactly is coming our way?" Lisa stepped forward and pointed to the final section of data they had decoded. "Something is happening to these stars. According to the data, they're dying in a sequence like dominoes falling across space. The pattern suggests Earth's sun will be affected within 6 months." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "We need to bring in more experts," Dr. Stewart said finally. "This needs to be verified independently before we take it to the president." What began as a small team soon expanded into a classified international project. Scientists from around the world were quietly flown in to verify the signal and its disturbing message. Each new analysis confirmed what Alan's team had discovered. Something catastrophic was moving through space, destroying stars as it went. They might have kept the secret longer if not for Keith Bennett, a radio hobbyist from Nebraska who had built a powerful receiver in his backyard. Keith picked up fragments of the signal. Not enough to understand the full message, but enough to know it wasn't from Earth. Excited by his discovery, he posted his findings online. The internet did what it does best. Within days, amateur astronomers around the world were pointing their equipment toward Proxima Centauri, picking up pieces of the signal. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed it was a hoax, others that an alien invasion was imminent. The term "the countdown signal" began trending worldwide. The president had no choice but to address the nation. She confirmed the signal was real but urged calm while scientists continued their work. Despite her reassurances, panic erupted in cities across the globe. Stock markets plummeted. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Military forces worldwide moved to high alert. Through it all, Alan and his team worked tirelessly to decode the remaining parts of the signal. Whatever was destroying the stars, the message seemed to contain more than just a warning. There were complex schematics buried in the data, instructions for building something beyond current human technology. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Lisa burst into Alan's office, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held out a tablet. "I've decoded the final segment," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alan took the tablet and studied the images on the screen. They showed detailed plans for a massive device, unlike anything humans had built before. Not a weapon, not a shield, something else entirely. "It's not just a warning," Lisa said, voicing what Alan was thinking. "It's instructions. They're telling us how to save ourselves." Alan looked up at her, the weight of understanding heavy on his shoulders. But who are they, and why would they help us? The answer lay hidden in the final piece of the signal, a segment they had initially overlooked. When they finally decoded it later that day, it left them speechless. The message hadn't come from aliens at all. It had come from humans, future humans, sending a desperate message back through time. The stars were burning, and humanity had already lived through this once before. Frank Miller stood in the middle of the massive underground facility, watching as hundreds of workers moved like ants around the strange machine taking shape before him. 6 months ago, he had been tending his garden in rural Montana, trying to forget his painful exit from NASA after being blamed for a failed mission. Now he was in charge of building humanity's last hope. "Dr. Miller, we have a problem with the central core," said a young engineer, handing him a tablet showing complex calculations. Frank studied the numbers with a frown. The device they were building, what everyone now called the beacon, required materials and technology that pushed the limits of human science. The instructions from the signal were clear, but implementing them was another matter. "Get Dr. Nelson in here," Frank said, handing back the tablet. "She'll know what to do." Dr. Patricia Nelson arrived minutes later. In her early 50s with streaks of silver in her dark hair, she moved with the energy of someone half her age. Before the signal, the scientific community had dismissed her theories about dimensional barriers as too radical. Now, those same theories formed the foundation of the beacon. "The core's molecular alignment is off by 3 degrees, Frank explained. "At this scale, it will tear itself apart when activated." Patricia finished his sentence. She studied the plans, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced ease. "We need to recalibrate using a quantum stabilizer. It's not in the original plans, but it should work," Frank nodded. "Make it happen." Above them, on the facility's observation deck, 2 military generals watched the activity below. "Will it be ready in time?" asked the first. The second general checked his watch. "It has to be. According to the astronomers, we have less than 90 days left." Far from the Wyoming facility, on the newly established lunar base. Major Steve Evans stood at the observatory window looking out at the stars. As head of security for the base, his job was to protect the astronomers who were monitoring the approaching cosmic disaster. "Major, you need to see this," called Dr. Laura Gordon, the base's lead astronomer. Steve joined her at the main telescope control station. On the screen was a live feed of Alpha Centauri, Earth's nearest stellar neighbor. "Watch," Laura said, pointing to subtle changes in the star's color. "The spectral emissions are shifting, just like the signal predicted." Steve wasn't a scientist, but even he could see something was wrong. The star seemed to flicker in an unnatural way, its edges becoming less defined. "How long?" he asked simply. Laura's voice was quiet. "At the current rate of destabilization, Alpha Centauri has maybe 2 weeks. After that..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen next. Their own sun would begin to show the same symptoms. Back on Earth, society balanced on a knife's edge. While governments worldwide poured resources into building the beacon, ordinary people faced the reality of extinction in different ways. In Chicago, Pastor Henry Ward's church overflowed each Sunday as people sought comfort in faith. His celestial salvation movement had grown from a small congregation to millions of followers worldwide. They believed the signal was divine in origin, a final chance for humanity to prove its worth. "God has sent us a ladder to climb above the coming flood," Henry preached to the crowd. "Just as Noah built an ark, we now build our beacon. Have faith." Meanwhile, in rural communities across America, a different movement grew. Diane Cooper, a former emergency management director, had established a network of survival communities. They didn't believe the beacon would save everyone, or perhaps anyone, and prepared for a world after the disaster. "We can't all fit in the lifeboat," Diane told her followers as they stockpiled supplies and built underground shelters. "But those who survive will rebuild. Humanity will endure." At the Wyoming facility, Frank worked 18-hour days, pushing himself and his team to their limits. The beacon now stood over 300 feet tall, a strange combination of advanced technology and bizarre geometries that made the eye want to look away. One night, as he reviewed the final assembly plans, Frank noticed something odd. A pattern in the beacon's design that hadn't registered before. The way energy would flow through the device once activated seemed designed not to protect Earth from the coming stellar disaster, but to transmit something away from Earth. Frank found Patricia in her lab, surrounded by equations scribbled on whiteboards. "I need to show you something," he said, spreading out the plans on her desk. "Look at the energy flow." Patricia studied the diagrams, her expression changing from confusion to shock as she realized what Frank had discovered. "This isn't designed to save us," Frank said quietly, making sure no one else could hear. "It's designed to save something from us." Patricia nodded slowly. "Not something. Information. The most valuable thing we have." She pointed to a section of the plans. "This component isn't a shield generator. It's a transmitter. The beacon isn't meant to protect Earth from the stellar collapse. It's meant to transmit data," Frank finished. "But what data? And to where?" Their discovery split the project team. Some scientists argued they should stop building immediately. Others insisted they follow the instructions exactly as given. The debate raged for days, until a transmission from the lunar base silenced everyone. "Alpha Centauri is gone," announced Major Steve Evans, his face grim on the video screen. Behind him, astronomers worked frantically at their stations. It didn't explode like a normal supernova. It burned from the inside out, then collapsed in on itself. There's nothing left but darkness. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth's nearest stellar neighbor had just vanished. According to the signal's timeline, their own sun would begin showing symptoms within days. Full collapse would follow in less than a month. The president called an emergency meeting with the beacon's leadership team. Frank and Patricia presented their discovery about the beacon's true purpose. "You're telling me this device won't save Earth?" the president asked. her voice tight with controlled panic. "No, Madam President," Patricia replied. "The Earth can't be saved, not physically. The beacon will transmit information, possibly human consciousness itself, to a safe location. It's an escape hatch for the human mind, not the human body." The President looked around the table at the assembled scientists and military leaders. "How many? How many people can this consciousness transmitter save?" Frank cleared his throat. "Based on our calculations of the power requirements and transmission capacity, 10,000 maximum." A heavy silence filled the room. 10,000. Out of 8 billion. Then we have no choice, the President said finally. "We complete the beacon according to plan, and we need to decide who gets saved." As they left the meeting, Patricia pulled Frank aside. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I didn't want to say in front of everyone." Frank waited for her to continue. "I've been analyzing the stellar collapse pattern. It's not natural, Frank. Stars don't just burn from the inside out and disappear. Something is causing this. Something is consuming the stars." Frank felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying we're not running from a natural disaster?" Patricia said, her eyes reflecting the overhead lights. "We're running from something that eats suns, and it's heading straight for us." Carol Reed stared at her computer screen until her eyes burned. As the chief engineer on the beacon's transmission system, she hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. The coffee beside her had gone cold, forgotten as she wrestled with the problem that had haunted the team since Frank and Patricia's discovery. "How do you transfer a human mind?" she muttered to herself. The answer came to her at 3:47 a.m. after everyone else had gone to sleep. She wasn't trying to solve the problem anymore. She was just reviewing the original signal data, looking for anything they might have missed. That's when she saw it. A simple pattern hidden in the background noise that everyone had overlooked. "It's not about the hardware," she whispered, as understanding washed over her. "It's about the connection." Carol rushed through the facilities, empty halls to Patricia's lab, where she found the physicist asleep at her desk. She shook her awake. "I've got it," Carol said, spreading printouts across the desk. "The beacon isn't just a transmitter, it's a bridge, a temporary wormhole generator." Patricia blinked sleep from her eyes as she studied Carol's work. This could work. But where is it sending people?" "Not people," Carol corrected. "Consciousness. And according to these coordinates," she pointed to a set of numbers, "it's sending them outside our galaxy, somewhere safe." By morning, Carol's discovery had reached the President. As riots broke out in major cities around the world, President Samantha Young prepared to address the nation. The truth couldn't be hidden any longer. Millions watched as the President appeared on screens worldwide. Her face was tired but determined as she looked into the camera. "My fellow citizens of Earth," she began, "the time has come for complete honesty. The signal we received was not sent by aliens. It was sent by us, a future version of humanity that survived the first wave of stellar collapses. They've sent back the only thing that can pass through the dimensional barriers: information." She paused, taking a breath before continuing. "The beacon we are building is not a shield or a weapon. It is a bridge, a way to send human consciousness across vast distances to a safe haven built by human survivors in another galaxy. These survivors left Earth generations ago using conventional spacecraft, long before we detected the threat. They've prepared a place for us, with synthetic bodies ready to receive human minds." Murmurs spread through the crowds gathered in public spaces to watch the broadcast. "We cannot save everyone," the President continued, her voice breaking slightly. "The energy required to create this bridge limits how many can cross. A global lottery will select 10,000 individuals whose consciousness will be transmitted. These 10,000 will carry forward our knowledge, our history, our culture, everything that makes us human." As the President explained the process, Dr. Vanessa Black worked in her lab at the Wyoming facility. As the world's leading neuroscientist, she had been recruited to develop the technology that would map human consciousness for transmission. "The scanner needs to be more precise," she told her assistant. "We're not just mapping memories, we're capturing the essence of a person." their personality, emotions, everything that makes them who they are. Security Officer Paul Rodriguez stood by the door, watching for any signs of trouble. With panic spreading worldwide, security at the facility had been doubled. Paul had been assigned specifically to protect Dr. Black, whose work was essential to the transmission process. "How much longer until it's ready?" Paul asked, checking his watch. According to the latest readings from the Lunar Observatory, their sun had begun showing the first signs of instability. Strange flares erupted from its surface, and its core temperature was rising in ways that defied explanation. "Days, not weeks," Vanessa replied without looking up from her work. "But it has to be perfect. We only get one chance at this." Across the country, lottery notifications were sent out. Some recipients celebrated their selection, while others fell into despair at being left behind. Families were torn apart as some members were chosen while others were not. The Pure Earth movement, a radical group opposed to the Beacon Project, grew more violent. They believed the signal was a trick, designed to steal human souls. Their leader, a former physics professor named Richard Donnelly, rallied his followers. "They're not saving humanity," he shouted to the crowd. "They're harvesting us. The government has made a deal with whatever is consuming the stars." 2 days later, the Pure Earth movement attacked a transmission equipment transport convoy. Though the attack was repelled, it signaled the beginning of a coordinated effort to stop the beacon from activating. At the Wyoming facility, Paul received word of increased threats against the project. He entered Vanessa's lab, interrupting her work. "We need to move you to a more secure location," he said urgently. "Intelligence suggests the Pure Earth movement is planning something big." Vanessa started to protest, but the look on Paul's face silenced her. She quickly backed up her research and followed him to a reinforced section of the facility, deep underground. They had barely reached the secure area when the first explosions rocked the surface buildings. Alarms blared as security forces engaged. "The attackers." "We need to get to the emergency bunker," Paul said, checking his weapon. "From there we can access the underground tunnels that lead to the secondary site." As they moved through narrow corridors, Paul received updates through his earpiece. The attack was larger than anyone had anticipated. Hundreds of Pure Earth followers had breached the perimeter, armed with stolen military equipment. "Why are they doing this?" Vanessa asked as they hurried through the dim emergency lighting. "Don't they understand we're trying to save humanity?" "Fear makes people do crazy things," Paul replied. "And someone convinced them that the beacon is evil." As they navigated the underground tunnels, Vanessa shared a theory she had developed while studying the signal data. "The star deaths aren't natural," she said between breaths as they ran. "Something is consuming them for energy, harvesting entire suns. That's what we're really running from." Paul glanced at her. "You mean something intelligent? Aliens?" "Maybe not aliens as we imagine them," Vanessa replied. "Maybe something so advanced and so different that we can't comprehend it. Something that sees stars the way we see coal or oil, just energy to be used." They reached the secondary site as dawn broke. Above ground, the battle for the primary facility continued, but the beacon itself remained secure. As they entered the backup control center, they found President Young already there, coordinating the global response. "Dr. Black," the president said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God you're safe. We need you now more than ever." Across the globe, the 10,000 lottery winners prepared for transmission. Among them was 24-year-old artist Emma Wilson, who had been randomly selected from millions of applicants. As she said goodbye to her parents, she tried to comprehend what was happening. "I'll still be me," she told them, tears streaming down her face. "Just somewhere else. In a different kind of body." Her mother held her tight. "Take our love with you, and remember Earth." Emma nodded, knowing she would be among the last humans to remember the blue planet as it was. She would carry humanity's cultural heritage to the stars, preserving art and music and stories for generations yet to come. As Earth's final days approached, the beacon neared completion. The stars above seemed to watch, waiting, as humanity prepared for its greatest journey, not across space but across reality itself. Dr. Roy Davis had not slept in 36 hours. As chief medical officer overseeing the consciousness transfers, he monitored each procedure with intense focus. The beacon's activation had created a shimmering portal in the center of the Wyoming facility, a doorway between worlds that glowed with unearthly blue light. Transfer subject 1457 complete, announced a technician. Consciousness successfully received at destination. Roy nodded and checked the vitals of the next person in line. A middle-aged teacher from Boston who lay still on the transfer bed, electrodes connected to her temples. Each transfer required precise calibration. Any error meant the permanent loss of that consciousness, a final death with no hope of survival. Begin transfer sequence for subject 1458, Roy ordered. The first 1,000 transfers had gone smoothly. The receiving station, built by human descendants who had fled using conventional spacecraft centuries ago, confirmed each arrival. The refugees, awakened in synthetic bodies that looked human, but were stronger, more durable, and designed to last for centuries. Roy moved to the main control panel where technicians monitored the beacon's power levels. The massive device required enormous energy to maintain the dimensional bridge. As Earth's power grids failed across the globe, the facility relied on its own nuclear generators. Power fluctuation in Sector 3, warned a technician. The solar flares are interfering with the cooling systems. The sun had begun its death throes 3 days earlier. Massive flares erupted from its surface, larger than any recorded in human history. Communication satellites failed, and the night sky glowed with aurora even at the equator. Reroute power from the secondary grids, Roy ordered. We can't lose momentum now. High above Earth, astronaut Linda Hayes commanded what remained of the International Space Station. Her crew of 5 had volunteered to stay behind, knowing they would never make it home. Their mission was vital, to observe and record the sun's final moments for transmission through the beacon. Solar mass ejection detected, reported her science officer. It's larger than the previous ones, heading directly toward Earth. Linda floated to the observation window and watched as a massive wall of superheated plasma erupted from the sun's surface. Through specialized filters, she could see strange distortions within the flare, patterns that defied natural physics. Are you recording this? She asked, not taking her eyes off the spectacle. Every wavelength, every frequency, confirmed the officer. If there's anything to learn about what's happening, we'll capture it. Linda activated the station's direct link to the Wyoming facility. Beacon control, this is ISS. We're tracking a Class X-50 solar flare headed toward Earth. Impact in approximately 17 hours. This will likely disable most remaining electronic systems. You need to accelerate transfers. Back at the facility, Roy received Linda's warning and immediately called an emergency meeting with the remaining project leaders. With Frank Miller, working on the beacon's core systems, Patricia Nelson represented the science team. 17 hours isn't enough, Patricia said, studying the data from the space station. At our current rate, we'll only transfer about 4,000 more people. Then we need to increase the transfer rate, Roy replied. Can we safely process multiple subjects simultaneously? Patricia hesitated. Maybe, but it will put enormous strain on the system, and on you. Your brain is directly monitoring each transfer. Roy had connected himself to the transfer system early in the process, using his own mind as a stability mechanism when equipment began failing. Each transfer sent echoes of consciousness through him, fragments of memories, emotions, and thoughts from the people being saved. It doesn't matter what it does to me, he said firmly. I'm staying behind anyway. Do whatever you need to do to the system. We're saving as many as we can. Across Earth's surface, those not selected for transfer faced their fate in different ways. Some gathered with loved ones in homes or churches. Others took to the streets in rage or despair. Many simply watched the changing sky, witnessing the death of their son. Soldier Eric Johnson had abandoned his post guarding the beacon 3 days earlier. His wife and children hadn't been selected in the lottery, so he chose to spend humanity's final hours with them rather than protecting the chosen few. As he drove across Oklahoma, he saw both the worst and best of humanity playing out in towns along the way. In one small community, He witnessed looters fighting over supplies that would be useless in days. In another, he found people gathering, in a park, sharing food and music in a final celebration of human connection. When he finally reached his home in Tulsa, his wife met him at the door with tears of joy. Their children, unaware of the full situation, were simply happy to have their father home early. That night, as they slept together in the living room under a pile of blankets, Eric watched the strange lights dancing in the sky and found an unexpected peace. Inside the beacon facility, Frank Miller worked feverishly in the core chamber. Strange, energies from the portal had begun affecting the equipment, causing malfunctions throughout the system. The transfer rate is becoming unstable. He called to his assistant over the roar of the machines. The solar disruption is accelerating faster than predicted. Patricia rushed into the chamber, her tablet displaying new data from the lunar observatory. Frank, the calculations were wrong. It's not just our sun. Something is actively interfering with the process. She showed him the screen, which displayed massive objects appearing at the edge of the solar system. Artificial constructs larger than planets, moving toward the sun. The star harvesters, Frank whispered. They've arrived early. Patricia nodded, grimly. They must have detected the beacon's energy signature. They know we're trying to escape. Frank looked up at the swirling portal above them. 6,000 minds had already transferred successfully. 4,000 remained, including President Young herself, who had insisted on being among the last to leave. We need to buy more time, Frank said, turning back to the controls. If I redirect power from the outer facility to the core, we might maintain the portal for another 12 hours. That would leave the outer rings defenseless against the solar flare, Patricia warned. Frank met her eyes. Everyone in those sections knew the risks. We all did. As the final groups prepared for transfer, Olivia White, the young astrophysicist, who had first helped identify the signal, monitored the approaching star harvesters from the facility's astronomy lab. Unlike most of the science team, she had not been selected for transfer. Her role was to document the harvesters for as long as possible, sending data through the beacon to help the survivors prepare defenses in their new home. Through the telescope, she watched the massive structures surrounding the dying sun. They were geometric but organic-looking, like enormous crystalline insects. As they positioned themselves around the star, Olivia could see energy beams connecting them to the sun's surface, accelerating its collapse. They're feeding, she whispered, into her recorder. They're draining the sun's energy at an exponential rate. Her observations were interrupted by an alert on her computer. The solar flare Linda had warned about was approaching faster than predicted. Earth had less than 3 hours before impact. Olivia grabbed her research and ran toward the core chamber. As she passed through the facility's corridors, she saw people rushing to complete final tasks. Some cried. Others worked in grim silence. A few smiled, finding strange joy in their final purposeful acts. When she reached the core, she found Frank reprogramming the beacon while Patricia coordinated the remaining transfers. The harvesters are accelerating the sun's collapse, Olivia reported, and the flare will hit sooner than we thought. Frank looked up from his work, a strange expression crossing his face. Olivia, you're one of the brightest minds I've ever worked with. You should be on the transfer list. Before she could respond, he tapped his tablet and showed her the updated list. Her name now appeared in the final group. But I wasn't selected, she said, confused. Someone has to stay behind to send the warning, Frank replied. I'm reprogramming the beacon to transmit a signal backward through time once we're gone. A temporal loop that might give humanity another chance in a parallel timeline. He smiled, sadly. I'm old. You have centuries ahead of you on the other side. As Earth's final hours approached, the transfer process accelerated. The remaining subjects were processed in groups of 20, their minds flowing through the portal like streams of light. Each person carried memories of Earth, its oceans and forests, its cities and music, its art and science and love. Each person carried a piece of humanity's soul to the stars. In orbit, Linda Hayes and her crew transmitted their final observations as the sun began to tear itself apart under the harvester's influence. Their data streamed through the beacon, providing vital information about the enemy humanity now faced. On the ground, as Earth's atmosphere began to burn around the Wyoming facility, Olivia White stepped onto the transfer platform as the last human consciousness to escape. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes was Frank Miller standing at the controls, his face illuminated by the dying sun's light as it filtered through the facility's failing shields. Then darkness, then light, then a new beginning among the distant stars. Olivia White opened her eyes to a world bathed in purple light. She lay on a bed in a white room, looking up at a ceiling that seemed to shift and move like water. For a moment she felt panic. Where was she? Then memories flooded back. Earth. The beacon. The transfer. "Welcome, Dr. White," said a gentle voice. Olivia turned her head to see a man standing beside her bed. He looked human, but something about his movements was too perfect, too smooth. "My name is Nathan Parker," he said. "I'm the director of New Haven Colony. You're the last arrival from Earth." Olivia sat up slowly, amazed at how easy it felt. Her new body responded with precision she had never experienced before. "It worked," she whispered. "We made it." Nathan nodded. 10,000 minds transferred successfully. You were the final one. He led her to a large window that overlooked a vast city. Structures of crystal and metal rose into an alien sky where two small suns shone. In the streets below, people walked and talked, looking just like humans despite their synthetic bodies. "This colony was established 300 years ago," Nathan explained. "When the first warnings of the star harvesters came, a small group left Earth in generation ships. They were our ancestors. They built this place for you, for all of you who would come after." In the days that followed, Olivia met others who had made the journey through the beacon. Emma Wilson, the young artist, had already begun creating memorial gardens that preserved Earth's biological record in both real and virtual forms. Paul Rodriguez and Vanessa Black led the colony's security and research divisions, preparing defenses against the star harvesters who might one day find them. Carol Reed, whose breakthrough had made the beacon possible, worked with a team adapting the technology to create a new communication network spanning their adopted galaxy. President Young addressed the growing civilization 1 month after the last arrival. Her consciousness, now housed in a synthetic form, advanced beyond her original body. She stood before thousands gathered in the central plaza. "We carry Earth within us now," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Not just memories, but its essence. We are humanity's second chance, and we will not waste it." The refugees learned that they were not alone in fleeing the star harvesters. Other civilizations had escaped similar fates, establishing colonies throughout the sanctuary galaxy. Some were almost unrecognizable to human eyes, beings of light or crystal or gas, yet all shared the common experience of loss and survival. Light years away, in the ruins of Earth's solar system, the final automated transmission from Linda Hayes' space station continued broadcasting into the void. The data contained everything humanity had learned about the star harvesters, their technologies, their patterns, their weaknesses. As decades passed, the signal reached distant worlds where other civilizations intercepted it, decoding humanity's final warning. And somewhere in the vast network of reality, another signal traveled, not forward through space, but backward through time. Frank Miller's final act had been to reprogram the beacon, using its remaining power to create a temporal loop that would reach across years to warn humanity before the disaster began. This signal, distorted by its journey through time, reached Earth 15 years earlier. It was received by a dedicated astronomer named Alan Morris, who had been studying radio signals from deep space when the pattern first appeared. In New Haven, Olivia sometimes walked alone at night, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. She thought of Frank Miller and all those who had stayed behind to ensure others could escape. She thought of Earth, its oceans and mountains, its cities and forests, all now gone. But Earth was not truly gone. It lived on in the minds and hearts of those who remembered it. And as humanity rebuilt in this new galaxy, they prepared for the day when they might face the star harvesters again. This time, they would be ready. In a lab deep within the colony, scientists studied the star harvesters' energy signatures, searching for weaknesses. Engineers designed new defensive systems, and on a special terminal connected to the colony's most powerful transmitter, Olivia worked each day on a special project, a message containing everything humanity had learned, designed to reach Earth. Even earlier in the timeline, the cycle would continue. Warnings sent back, preparations made, minds saved. With each loop, humanity gained more knowledge, more preparation. Whether it would ever be enough remained to be seen, as the stars continued their inexorable march toward destiny. But one thing was certain: humanity endured. Not as bodies, but as minds. Not as individuals, but as a civilization. Not just surviving, but evolving into something new, a blend of human spirit and advanced technology that might one day challenge even the star harvesters themselves. Earth was gone, but humanity lived on among the stars. ND